You have found yourself on another episode of Locked On Bulls. On today's episode, we're going to talk about Billy Donovan's rankings in CBS's NBA head coaching poll and where he sits at 24th. Is that a fair ranking for the Chicago Bulls head coach? And does that paint a bad picture for the future of the Chicago Bulls as they're going through a rebuild and trying to develop young players? We're going to talk about that. Plus, which Chicago Bull has the most to prove in the 2024-25 season? All that and more on today's Locked On Bulls.
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily Chicago Bulls podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Bulls, member of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every single day. My name is Haize, host and creator of the Chicago Bulls Central and Chicago Bears Central YouTube pages and podcast. And yeah, that's it. And let's go ahead and get into the topics for today, y'all. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Bulls fans. So we're going to start this one off with a poll from CBS. This one just came out earlier today in which they ranked every head coach in the NBA. They even broke it down into tiers as well. And the tier that the Chicago Bulls are in is not very promising. So to break down the tiers, and then we'll focus on where Billy Donovan is, and then we'll start looking at some of the other tiers. So tier number 1 was the Undisputed King. There was one coach in that. You guys can probably guess who's there. Tier 2 were the elites. There were 4 coaches in that tier. Then there were the Wonder Kids in tier 3. We'll talk about those guys. And then you have coming into 10-4 obvious floor raisers that raise the floor of their team. There were 6 coaches in that tier. Billy Donovan's not in that tier. You have tier 5, the living legend. That's Greg Popovich. We're not even going to bury that one. Then you have the middle of the road tier. Billy Donovan didn't even make that tier. There are 4 coaches in that tier. And then you have the you look promising, but it's still a tad early tier. Billy Donovan's not in that tier either. You get to tier 8. I wouldn't be enthused. And that is the tier that Billy Donovan is in. Now, there is another tier below that in the we don't know enough tier. So Billy Donovan at least isn't in the lowest tier in this ranking. He's in the second to lowest tier in this ranking, and it's not very promising. He's in that 8th tier that I mentioned, the I wouldn't be enthused tier, and he comes in overall ranked 24th. He's second to last in this tier, only above Chauncey Billups, who's the head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers. In this tier, right along with Billy Donovan, is Doc Rivers, J.B. Bickerstaff, and Chauncey Billups below it. Those other 3 are all ahead of Billy Donovan in that tier. And this does not paint a great picture, in my opinion, for Billy Donovan. It just doesn't, right? And Billy Donovan ranked 24th out of 30 NBA head coaches. Honestly, I could say that it would be surprising, but it isn't. When you look at Billy Donovan's recent resume with the Chicago Bulls, what does he have? Outside of from year 1 to year 2 with the Chicago Bulls, every year after that, Billy Donovan's record has gotten worse, right? He's had a worse record with his team. Now, there have absolutely been insinuating circumstances to be involved there with injuries, things like that. But the fact of the matter is, as a head coach, much like with a quarterback in the NFL, you are in large part judged by your record. And Billy Donovan's record has gotten worse. You look at what do you measure a coach by? And this is always the thing that I like to look at when it comes down to coaching in the NBA. You're judged by either how you develop, right? You're judged by that, how you uplift your team, how you lead your team, and then your win-loss record. And which of those areas has Billy Donovan excelled at? I would say there's not a lot of them, if you can even make the case that he's excelled at any of them. He hasn't excelled at development, right? Kobe White was drafted by the previous front office. Now, Billy Donovan has been the coach that Kobe White has had for the longest part of his career, but then you still look at Kobe White and the work he puts in the offseason. It's kind of hard to give that development 100% to Billy Donovan. Kobe's role has also dramatically changed every year under Billy Donovan, really every year in his NBA career. Then you have Ayo Dosunmu, right? A second-round pick that performed excellently well as a starter last year and coming off the bench, adapted so well to that role. Billy Donovan did play him early in his rookie year. He had a down sophomore year. He bounced back in a major way in his third year, and we got to see the development of Ayo Dosunmu and how he comes out next season, being that first guard off the bench more than likely for the Chicago Bulls. And then it's a bunch of question marks. Patrick Williams, who has turned into a solid defender and a solid three-point shooter, even though not great volume at all, right? There's that part of it. But then you have question marks. Marko Simonovic, Billy Donovan really didn't coach him. He was in the G League most of his time. Dalen Terry, we knew Dalen Terry was going to be extremely raw. Julian Phillips was kind of on pace to play about 50 to 55 games, maybe even close to 60. When you look at it, he played almost over 40 games, or right at 40 games his rookie year. But still, that development piece hasn't quite been there. Has the team fought above their weight? No. The Chicago Bulls have really never had a record that really excelled past where they were. I know some Bulls fans are going to go to, but Haize, during Lonzo's time here, we were number one team in the East. Yeah, the Eastern Conference that we didn't beat any of the top teams in the Eastern Conference really over that run. We beat in a lot of bottom feeders. We had a favorable schedule at that time. We had already started showing signs of coming back down to earth during that time as well. On top of that, it wasn't sustainable. We were a new team, Eastern Conference, COVID year, all that type of stuff. So there's that aspect of it as well. You can't overlook that, in my opinion. I'm not giving a whole bunch of credit for that because I'm not overlooking that. So when you look at it, the Bulls have gone from 44 wins in 31 years, Billy Donovan's first year, to 46 his second year, to 40, then to 39. And we've missed the playoffs 3 out of those 4 years. And the year that we did make the playoffs, we had 1 playoff win, and that was it. Billy Donovan being ranked 24th in a coaching poll is not shocking to me at all. It just isn't. The tier, the wouldn't be enthused. I think a lot of Bulls fans aren't enthused about the Chicago Bulls upcoming season. Now, he's not in the we don't know enough because he can't be, mainly because he's been a coach for as long as he has been. But let's look at the other tiers, right? So we talked about the tier ahead of Billy Donovan. Just to talk about that lower tier, the we don't know enough tier, JJ Redick, Brian Keefe, I think is how you pronounce it, with the Wizards, Charles Lee with the Hornets, Jordi Fernandez with the Nets, and Darko with the Raptors. We haven't seen anything from those guys at the NBA level. Yeah, you're right. We can't judge them. Let's look at the tier above where Billy Donovan is. You look promising, but it's a tad early. Kitty Atkinson, Willie Green, Jamal Mosley. That's with the Cavs, the Pelicans, and the Magic, respectively. I think all those teams have done better than the Bulls. I think that's fair. You look at the middle of the road tier, tier 6. Jason Kidd, his team was just in the finals. He definitely belongs to be in that higher in the tier. Taylor Jenkins with the Grizzlies. That team has had a lot of injuries last year. Let's see what they bring this year. Quinn Snyder with the Hawks. I would kind of put them more close to the Chicago Bulls and Billy Donovan's tier personally. Mike Malone with the Nuggets. This guy, he's won an NBA title. He's going to be ahead of Billy Donovan. The living legend tier, Greg Popovich. He's a living legend. There's no arguments for that. Tier 4, the obvious floor raisers. These are teams that, according to CBS, raise the floor of their team. Mike Brown with the Kings. How you guys feeling about that one? Does Mike Brown raise the ceiling, the floor of the team that he's with? Let me know what you guys think on that down below. Chris Finch with the Timberwolves. I think that's fair. Joe Mazzulla with the Celtics. Absolutely. Tom Thibodeau with the Knicks. Absolutely. Mike Budenholzer with the Suns. Yeah, listen, we'll see. Because if Coach Bud is raising the floor of that team, hey, Ime Udoka with the Rockets, I think that's clear as well. You get into tier 3, the Wonder Kids. Will Hardy with the Jazz. I think he has done a magnificent job with that Jazz team, considering where they are and kind of the fluctuation with that front office and what they want to do with that roster. Mike Daigneault with the Thunder, clearly, no doubt there. Then the elites, tier 2, the elites. Ty Lue, Steve Kerr, Rick Carlisle, Nick Nurse. The Clippers, Warriors, Pacers, and 76ers. Yeah, those guys belong in those tiers. I'm not going to argue that. And then you have tier 1, the undisputed king. They have Eric Spoelstra here. Eric Spoelstra is a coach that not only raises your floor, he raises your ceiling. That's the type of coach that Eric Spoelstra is. On top of that, he is the type of leader. If you don't have a leader on your team, which the Heat do have, but if they did not have a leader on that team, Eric Spoelstra is the type of coach that's going to be the leader of the team. He's going to lead that team. He's going to take that team and grab it by the horns, and he's going to lead that team. So Billy Donovan being ranked 24th on this list, I feel like it's fair. And it's up to Billy Donovan in this change of direction with this team to prove that wrong, right? And can he do that? That is the biggest question here, is can Billy Donovan realistically change the way that he's viewed as a head coach this season. And when you look back at the measurables, the things that you judge a coach on, if this team going younger, having a point guard in Josh Giddey, right, having Kobe White rise up to another tier, Zach LaVine, Jalen Smith, Patrick Williams, if these guys now having Modest Bucilis there as well, if he starts looking like an NBA player, if you start having these guys get to that point, then I think that starts turning around the development aspect of Billy Donovan. If this Bulls team that is slated to win 28 or predicted to win 28 and a half to upwards to about 32 games by a lot of betting sites, if they are better than that, if this team where some Bulls fans think this team could go in 40 wins, I don't share that optimism. But if he does get this team closer to 40 wins, I would even say this, getting to what the Bulls had last year at 39 wins, with this team going much younger and having a more clear path of development, I would say that that is a better place than what you were last year. And to me, that kind of solves another criticism of Billy Donovan. But we'll see. Billy Donovan has 2 years left on his contract with the Chicago Bulls, and we'll end up seeing if he, over those 2 years, can start turning around some of the criticisms around his coaching. But you guys, as always, can let me know how you guys feel about that down below. Next up, we're going to talk about which Chicago Bull has the most to prove in the 2024-25 season. But before we get into that, we got to get into a message from our sponsor, and that's FanDuel. All right, Bulls fans, we've been talking to you guys a lot about FanDuel, and you've heard us talk about it. It is America's #1 sports book, and with basketball right on the precipice of coming back, football's back in full gear, right? FanDuel can help you with that. Football's back. Baseball's still going on, right? On top of that, you got the WNBA. You got college basketball coming back. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book for a reason, and they have a great deal right now. We have a little something different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Guys, I cannot stress to you enough how much of a steal this deal is. 3 weeks free of NFL Sunday Ticket. Listen, if you guys love football as much as I do, having the ability to watch every out-of-market game at your fingertips, that's something that you just can't overlook. So make sure you guys go over there, visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Again, that is visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Bulls fans. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Bulls, man, and making us your first listen every single day. And you've been doing that for 3 years straight with me and Pat being here, but now it's just me holding it down solo. But for your second listen, right when you're done listening to this, there's no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBA, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Now, let's talk about our team every day, and that is the Chicago Bulls. And one of the bigger questions here heading into the season for the Chicago Bulls, in my humble opinion, is who has the most to prove on this roster? There's a lot of candidates, right? Let's go through it. You have Kobe White with second in most improved player of the year voting. In my opinion, Kobe White is somebody who still has to prove that last year wasn't a fluke. I think that's my personal opinion on it. I'm not expecting everyone to share that opinion, but I do think that, we've seen players. John Salmons came to Chicago and had a 20-point per game season, right? And in no way am I saying that that's Kobe White. I think he is much better than that. I expect him to have a much better season this year, but he does have a lot to prove. Breaking down last season after his injury, hitting a wall with the minutes that he played, being one of the best clutch scorers in the game of basketball. And then also he had some of the most clutch assists, some of the most clutch rebounds. Kobe White balled out in the clutch last season for the Chicago Bulls. Now he's stepping into a role where he's starting off the season with a higher pecking order in the Bulls' offensive game plan and scheme. So it's up to Kobe White to show that he can do that and that he deserves that, and last year wasn't a fluke. That's a lot to prove in of itself. Then outside of that, outside of Kobe, you have a new addition in Josh Giddey. I would say that Josh Giddey has a lot to prove, right? You look at how his season ended with the OKC Thunder. right? And that's that last playoff series. He looked like garbage, right? And while he has had seasons of averaging over 17 points, almost 8 rebounds, almost 6 assists, he's been top 10 in the league in triple doubles every single year that he's been in the NBA. Now you're heading to a situation where theoretically, we still got to see, but on paper, they're going to be putting you in a situation where you're going to be able to play to your skill set. You're going to be able to play to your strengths. And so Josh Giddey has a lot to prove as well, on top of he is a restricted free agent at the end of the year. So whether his future is with the Bulls or his future is anywhere else, he has a lot to prove this season. This is the season. This is probably going to be one of the only season so far Josh Giddey's career, because he's not counting a rookie year. He was playing with Shai's second year, where he gets to be the point guard. And I know some Bulls fans are doubting if he's going to be the point guard. He's going to be the point guard, but he has that now to prove. He has that. Zach LaVine, tons to prove for Zach LaVine, right? I mean, people look at Zach LaVine and basically have talked about him for a full almost 8 to 10 months as if he's trash. This is a player that only 9 players in the NBA scored more points in the NBA than Zach LaVine from 2019 to the end of 2023. That's it. Only 9 players. And those 9 players were MVP candidates, final candidates. So Zach LaVine, who has been talked about as if he's just garbage, has a lot to prove. And on top of, if he does want to improve his trade value, if he even wants to stay here with the Chicago Bulls, he has tons to prove. Then you get to some of the other players on this team that still have to prove. Vooch, at this point, Vooch is Vooch. I'm not going to put Vooch on any type of list that he has to prove anything, because Vooch is Vooch. But Patrick Williams, a number 4 overall pick in the draft. And Patrick Williams has, for the most part, been cool, but that's not what you want for where Patrick Williams was selected at. You want more than that from Patrick Williams. And for as much talk as has been around Patrick Williams, and you know, some people have made the caveat or the reasoning, right, to say, well, if DeMar DeRozan wasn't on this team, commanded as many shots as what he did, maybe we'd see Patrick Williams a little bit better. P. Will has a lot to prove as well this upcoming year. And more so, can he get in his own way? For me, I look at P. Will and say, can he get in his own way? Can you clear what's in between your ears and go out there and perform like you give a damn? Can you do that, Patrick Williams? Can you look like you're engaged for a full 48 minutes? Can you do that, right? Because that, to me, if you get a Patrick Williams that's out there to prove a point, that's a different P. Will to me. But P. Will has a lot to prove, on top of he just got his contract. He just got his contract, $18 million a year. He got his contract. Now, can you go out there and prove that you deserve it? Matter of fact, can you go out there and prove that contract is actually a steal, right? That's what we want to see from Patrick Williams. And he has that opportunity to show that. Can Patrick Williams do that? That remains to be seen. We'll see. So those are the things that I'm looking at when I'm looking at guys and saying, hey, you know, who has the most to prove? Miles Busilis, yeah, he's a rookie. It's difficult for me to say that rookies have a lot to prove because it's their first year in the league. Set a foundation, and then we'll see what you bring in year 2. But even to a much smaller extent, Dalen Terry has something to prove. Are you a bust? Can you stay in the NBA? Can you do that? Right? So those are things. Lonzo Ball, can you stay healthy? And what do you look like when you're healthy? So there are a lot of players that have a lot to prove on the Chicago Bulls team, but who has the most, right? And that comes down to how you view it personally. That comes down to how these players view it, and that comes down to the impact that you think these players can have. I would say my vote would still go to Kobe White. And the reason why is because Kobe White, who proves that last year wasn't a fluke, a Kobe White that proves that he still has another year to go into than even what he did last year, that completely raises the ceiling of the Chicago Bulls going forward for quite a bit, right? That puts this new young direction that you sent yourself down a completely different path. If Kobe White proves that it's more in Kobe White left to uncover. If he has yet another gear that he can take it to, he has that. And if Kobe White proves that, that's where you start getting the things looking considerably different for this Bulls team. So I would say it's a mix between Kobe White and Josh Giddey. I think those two players to me are the most. We know who Zach LaVine can be when he's fully healthy and locked in. That's close to a 50-40-90 player. Get back to that, right? If you can take and willingly take a secondary role, then that's something you can prove. But to me, it's not the same. Kobe's proving, and what he has to prove changes the direction and shortens that path of the Chicago Bulls getting back to relevancy. Josh Giddey, kind of with the same path. If Josh Giddey comes in here and proves with some of his more large defenders, right, of people who like Josh Giddey's game and how they believe in him, if he proves that right, that's a huge thing to prove that changes the direction of this Bulls team as well. So that's my personal opinion. If you guys are watching this, you guys can absolutely let me know how you guys feel on that and who you think on the Chicago Bulls roster has the most to prove. Next up, before we end the show, we'll be talking about a player in Onuralp Bitim and asking, can he make the final roster? All right, Bulls fans, man. Thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Bulls. We appreciate the everydayers who are here with the Chicago Bulls and Locked On Bulls, sitting with us through this every single day and supporting the channel, promoting the channel. Make sure you guys subscribe to the YouTube. If you're on the podcast side, go over and subscribe to the YouTube as well. If you watch us on YouTube, go and leave a 5-star review on iTunes. You can't leave a review on YouTube. Go over to iTunes, Spotify, wherever you do have access to, and go ahead and leave us a 5-star rating there, because they don't have reviews yet. It's ratings over on Spotify. But if you have Apple Podcasts, leave us a review there. All right, last topic of the day. And this is kind of a broader topic. I had to title it something, is that will Onuralp Bitim make this roster? Now, Bitim, when the Bulls signed Onuralp, it's still one of the more consumed episodes that we've had, either in podcast form or on the YouTube side for Locked On Bulls. It just is, right? People were interested. It's this player that AK went over and watched the season before signing him. He was at some random EuroLeague game, and it turns out he was scouting Onuralp. Now, it was rumored that the Bulls were going to sign him. Maybe some initial doubt. We ended up signing him to a two-way contract last year. He gets converted over to a NBA contract. It's partially guaranteed. And Bitim is a player that theoretically, and what he did over on EuroLeague, if you're looking at that, if any of that translates, he can put the ball on the floor. He's an active defender. Wouldn't call him a lockdown defender, but an active defender. On top of that, he's also a player that brings a much-needed skill set to this Bulls, some three-point shooting. Now, the problem is that everything that I just told you about Onuralp is all great in theory. We didn't see very much of it last year. Now, the thing with Onuralp as well is that he got hurt early into last season. When you go back and look at it, I think he got poked in the eye. It ended up being like his third or fourth game after converting over to the roster. So we never really got to see Onuralp really, theoretically. He played 23 games for the Bulls last season. He started one game. And so the question is still there on how much of the theoretical, the EuroLeague Onuralp can come and perform in the NBA. Can he get that shot off? Is it quick enough? Can he create the separation that he created over in EuroLeague? And then you factor in as well the players that the Bulls brought in that are competition to making the roster over Onuralp Bitim. THT, a player that flawed, not a great three-point shooter, not a great defender, but he scored 10 points per game at an NBA level. He's contributed off benches and starting. The problem with THT is that he scored 10 points, but he's needed about 23 minutes to do so. But a player that is bringing some competition. You got Kenny Lofton Jr., who another player who has shown some flashes at the NBA level, not a whole lot, but is a player that has some promise and that it can play at a position that the Bulls may need a little bit more depth at than a wing that Onuralp Bitim shapes up to be at playing the shooting guard or the small forward, right? So that's there as well. EJ Liddell, I think EJ Liddell is kind of destined for the Windy City Bulls, so I don't know how much of a threat that he is, but make no mistake about it, EJ Liddell is coming in trying to prove that he deserves a roster spot as well. So you have these players that are competition to try to make the roster over Onuralp, and the question is can Bitim make the roster for the Bulls? And the way that I look at it is, I still probably give the edge to Onuralp, mainly because the Bulls brought him over here for a reason. They made that investment for a reason. Yeah, they safeguarded themselves by giving him a partial guaranteed contract, but there was something that they saw in him, that they scouted him, that they wanted him here. And to that, already being a year in the system, he's already been in Chicago. He's reported early to the workouts. He's there. He's working. He has a familiarity with this coaching staff. Well, some, because we turned over the coaching staff. With the player development department, right? AK brought him over, like I said, personally scouted him, flew overseas to scout him himself. So I still give the edge to Onuralp to make this team. but nobody's going to make it easy. And Ernalop is going to have to come in and show that in the time that he spent in the G League, in the time that he spent in the NBA, over the time that he spent here, is that he learned something to bring to the table to try to make the back end of the bench. And at best case scenario, what Ernalop can show and improve is that for as 3-point shooter, you have to have him on the court for some spacing. And if he does that, that gives him the edge. But nothing's a given, and nothing should be a given. And overall in this topic, what I just want to seal home is that nothing should be a given in training camp for the Bulls. We are not at the place as a team or as a franchise where anything can be a given or a foregone conclusion. It just shouldn't be, especially with your back end of the bench players and your back end of the bench rotation. And even making the roster for the Chicago Bulls, that's just the beginning for Ernalop. He still has to find a way to crack the rotation with players like Julian Phillips, players like Torrey Craig, players like maybe even Lonzo if Lonzo's healthy, right? Definitely Ayo, definitely Jalen Smith, right? All ahead of Ernalop in the rotation. And if you can't crack that, if you can't pass those guys up, then you're just going to be the next European player that the Bulls brought over that never really turned into anything for us. That doesn't mean his NBA journey's over with, and I, for one, hope that it's not. But, you know, it just comes. He has to bring it in training camp. This is a really important training camp for players trying to crack the rotation and make the back end of the Chicago Bulls bench. And for a team that isn't necessarily slated to make the playoffs, that's a really interesting place to be in. And so as we are now officially 2 weeks away from Media Day, which means that we are 15 days away from training camp opening, there's a lot of questions still left on the board for the Chicago Bulls to answer over this period of time, and we'll see if the Bulls can find the answer to it. But that is my time for today. Make sure you guys are following us at Locked On Bulls. You can follow me personally at CEO Haize. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Bulls. We are free and available on every podcasting app and platform of your choice, as well as YouTube. And yeah, that's it. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Love you guys. Go Bulls. Peace.